Okay, class, welcome to social studies, and I hope you're excited to learn because I know for a fact I'm excited to teach this topic because it is one of my favorite topics to learn in American history. Today, we're going to be learning about the emancipation of slaves during the American Civil War, which is a very interesting topic for me and a very interesting topic to debate. Not only are we just going to be learning about what the event was, we're going to be looking at two different interpretations of this event and really forming an argument as to which interpretation we believe to be, or you guys believe to be, stronger. So now what I'm going to have you guys do is before we start our lesson, I'm going to send a link into the chat and you guys are going to go to a website called Padlet. Some of you may have used Padlet before, but you're going to click on this link and it's going to take you to a website where you're going to click the little plus in the bottom right corner and it'll let you add a flashcard. And on the flashcard, I just want you guys to write a sentence or two basically describing who you think was responsible for freeing slaves during the Civil War. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a lot. If you guys saw in the email yesterday, I sent out two sources. It doesn't have to be based off those. I just want you guys to sort of get your brain working, sort of get thinking about who you think was responsible for freeing the slaves. It can be anything you guys can think of. I need 1 to 2 sentences. I'll send the link again in case anyone didn't see it the first time. Okay. Okay, I like what I'm seeing so far. Abolitionists, okay.
Sean, how do we send it?
You just hit, I think you just like click away and it'll and
Oh,
it'll
okay.
it'll send.
Thank you.
No problem. The American, okay. Okay, abolitionists. Take another about 30 seconds, 45 seconds to get your answers down, okay? I like what I'm seeing so far. There's a lot of different ideas here. The radical Republicans, Abe Lincoln, abolitionists. Has slavery really ended? That's a good point. That's a good point. But I want you guys to sort of just think who you think was responsible for, if not ending slavery, for passing of the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation. Who was responsible for those? Take another 15, 20 seconds. Okay. I'm liking what I'm seeing here. I think that's good. I think everyone, it looks like everyone's got their points down. If you guys have any last sentences, I'll let you finish that. But in the meantime, what we're going to do is I'm going to send you guys into breakout rooms of only about 2 or 3 people. And what you're going to do in these breakout rooms is you're just going to sort of have a quick conversation about what you wrote on the Padlet, why you wrote that answer, what made you think that particular reason, and then you're going to write what background information did you have. So, for example, did you remember learning about it in middle school? Did you read about it somewhere else? And I'm going to send these questions into the chat right now so you guys can see them while you're actually in these breakout rooms. So hopefully, there you go. Those are your questions that you're going to do, and you're only going to be in the breakout rooms for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. It's not going to be a long time. It's just to sort of get discussing about what you wrote. Okay. 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 Oh, Kevin, did you not get a room? Okay.
Yeah, my Wi-Fi cut out, so
Okay. I'll add you to a room right now.
okay, cool.
There. Should have gotten that. Hey, David.
Ew. Just us. Oh, here's-
Did you hear him? What?
Okay, I think that's everyone back from the breakout rooms. Awesome. So I hope that in those breakout rooms, you guys sort of got an idea to hear some differing opinions and maybe remember something that you also may have learned or may have seen that you may have just forgotten about from hearing it from somebody else. I hope those breakout rooms were a good chance for you guys to hear different opinions on this topic. So now what I'm going to do is before I send you guys off again to go into the excerpts that I sent you guys out, I'm going to give a short lecture. It's only going to be like 2 minutes, 3 minutes, just sort of introducing you guys to the two different arguments that we're going to be looking at today. And I want to preface this by saying that these are not the only two interpretations of this historical event. You can interpret it however you want if you can back your interpretation with evidence, but these are the two that we're going to be looking at based on the evidence based on the sources that I have today, okay? So let me share my screen. Okay. So everyone can see the screen, correct?
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay. So the debate we're going to be looking at today is who actually freed the slaves. And I'm going to give you guys a short introduction into the two arguments that were going to be presented today from excerpts 1 and excerpt 2. So the first argument that we're going to be looking at is the argument that Abraham Lincoln was more responsible for freeing the slaves. Now, essentially in this argument, the main point is that Abraham Lincoln won the American presidency on an anti-slavery platform, and that this platform ultimately triggered a chain of events that culminated with the freedom of the slaves with things like the 13th Amendment and the Emancipation Proclamation. The argument is that Abraham Lincoln was always opposed to slavery, and that if he had never been elected, these chain of events may not have actually begun and may not have actually gotten underway. So therefore, Abraham Lincoln was the main person responsible for freeing the slaves. The second argument that we're going to be looking at is that runaway slaves were actually more responsible for freeing themselves during the American Civil War. Now, in this excerpt, the author makes the argument that by escaping from their plantations in the South into the North, the slaves forced the issue of slavery and freedom upon the Lincoln administration. Their argument is that the Lincoln administration had not been worried about freeing the slaves, and that if the slaves had not escaped into the North and brought this issue to the doorstep of the government, that it may not have ever happened. So therefore, they believe that the slaves themselves taking action was what actually inspired the end of slavery, right? So those are the two different arguments that we're going to be looking at in the excerpts today. And what you guys are going to do is I'm going to break you guys out again into groups, and you're going to be looking at two different excerpts from an article, okay? So I sent you guys an email yesterday with excerpts 1 and excerpts 2. Now, one of the two, now whichever document you're assigned gives an argument and gives evidence and makes a claim about who they think was more responsible for ending slavery, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send some discussion questions, some guiding question that I want you guys to look at and answer while you're reading your documents, right? So these are the questions here. These three questions here are the ones that I want you guys to answer when you're actually reading these documents, okay? So I want you guys to answer who is responsible for freeing the slaves according to this excerpt? What arguments does the author make for this opinion? Why do they believe that one side or the other was more responsible? And finally, what evidence does the author call on to support these arguments? So what specific examples are they using to make this claim good, make it a good, solid claim, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break you guys out into 4 breakout rooms. And if you're in groups 1 and 2, you're going to read excerpt number 1. And if you're in groups 3 and 4, you're going to read excerpt number 2, okay? So, and as I said yesterday, those excerpts are in the email I sent to you guys yesterday, okay? So you're going to get about 6 minutes to read these documents and answer these questions, okay? So, and I'm going to be hopping in between rooms to help answer any questions. And if you need anything cleared up, call me to your room and I'll make my way there to help you out, okay? So let me break you guys out again. So as I said, groups 1 and 2 are reading excerpt number 1, and 3 and 4 are reading excerpt number 2. How's everything going here, guys? You guys?
Yeah, I just finished reading and I know that like we just broke off to read it first. So
Okay.
we haven't really started yet.
No
Sorry.
problem. No problem. I'll be back.
That he's making is, I think, is he believes that Lincoln was more focused on preserving the Union than the issue of slavery, which yes and no, because I think coming from Illinois is talking a lot more about the frontier, like ending it in the frontier, and so a lot of it was that, and so, but I think a lot of it too was like saying, okay, we're gonna allow the South to continue to practice it, but we're ending it in the South.
Yeah.
I think that's where the argument's made. And so, what
And the
evidence
second
does the
question.
author use?
Okay.
Hi, Sean.
Hi,
Hi,
guys.
Sean. Okay, so
Abraham Lincoln is what this one's talking about, basically, and how he supported the abolition of slavery. What
Guys, I'm
arguments
gonna add
does the author-
lineage to your group. Sorry, Luigi.
All good. What argument does the author make for this opinion?
Oh, never mind. Sorry.
so he quotes in the on the second page. Where does it say? I just read it a second ago.
It goes back that far, you know?
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah. So do we believe this guy?
I mean, I don't know. I don't like putting I feel like history it's like we have a tendency to just like give someone all the credit, right? To like just, if something huge like this happens, it's just like, oh, it's Abe Lincoln, like he did a great job, he did this, he freed the slaves. And really it's a lot of people that were fighting for this like long before he did this, and they would have done it way before he had the opportunity to do it. So I mean, I don't know. It's interesting. I feel like you can't talk about freeing the slaves without mentioning Abe Lincoln, but I think it's definitely important to consider everyone that played a part in this.
Yeah, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. Kevin, are you back on? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I just
Yep.
we're talking
We-
about the Emancipation Proclamation, and my computer was like, no, none
Yep.
of that. No,
Yes,
okay.
it enslaved you and wouldn't let
Yeah.
you move on. So Greg and I were both
You notice. I did not notice that timer.
Okay, so I think that's everyone back from the breakout rooms. I hope that you guys had enough time to read your documents and answer the questions. So now that you guys have had this time, anybody from rooms 1 and 2 who had excerpt number 1, what claim is the author making about who was more responsible for ending slavery? Just the claim. What is the claim the author is making?
Well, I had excerpt 1, and he definitely was trying to push the claim that the slaves are definitely more responsible
Okay.
for freeing themselves.
Okay,
yeah.
and anybody else from groups 1 and 2, what argument does he make to support that claim?
The argument he makes is that like the freed slaves, not the slaves in the South like returned north or to Union camps and like were taken and like forced the issue upon Lincoln.
Okay. Okay, awesome. And finally, anyone else from groups 1 and 2, what evidence, what specific examples does the author call upon to support this argument? Did anybody see in the excerpt that they had a quote from Abraham Lincoln saying that if he could preserve the Union without freeing any slaves, he would? Did anybody see that quote? Did anybody remember that from excerpt 1? So yeah, that would be an example of, yeah, Cameron.
I was just going to say we also talked about one thing that was interesting was the fact that they exempted part of the South from the Emancipation Proclamation, and none of us really knew about that. So that kind of goes off what you were just saying about how like he wasn't even really fully for ending slavery.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome. I think that those are good examples of the argument for the runaway slaves. And now anyone from groups 3 and 4, who in your, well, I think we know, but what claim does your author make as to who is more responsible for ending slavery?
I guess I'll go.
So the author clearly claims that like it was the actions of Abraham Lincoln and the North that freed the slaves.
Okay, awesome. And what is their main argument as to why Abraham Lincoln? Kevin, you can go, or anyone else from groups 3 and 4.
One of the quotes that we looked at was that it was Lincoln's platform for his running for
Mhm.
president, that he had an anti-slavery platform.
Mm-hmm. And that his anti-slavery platform is what caused the Civil War and ultimately led to a chain of events resulting in the Emancipation. Does anyone remember specific examples of different legal actions that came as a result of the Civil War and as of the secession and so on and so forth? It was, I don't think it was something I underlined, but I think it was in there. If you guys remember, it mentioned things like the Confiscation Acts, the Emancipation Proclamation, and the 13th Amendment were different examples of legal actions that were taken. And those would serve as evidence, specific sources and specific events in history that show and defend this argument that Abraham Lincoln was more responsible. So I think that based on what both groups helped us do, we got a good explanation into the two different arguments on this topic. So now I'm going to open the floor up. I want you guys to take about 30 seconds, a minute. Think about which side of the debate you believe to be true. Which side do you fall under? Do you believe that Abraham Lincoln was more responsible, or do you believe that the slaves were more responsible? So take about 15, 30 seconds, think about that, and we're going to get back and we're going to discuss. Don't leave the call. Stay here. I'm not letting you guys leave.
I think it's like a combination of both. I think it's very easy to pick one side and say like one person was responsible, but I think, like I said in my post-it note, that it's a group of people.
Mhm.
And I think that there was a lot of drive to unite the Union, which is why a lot of it went through. But I think it was just a combination of both movements coming into play at the same time.
Interesting. Does anybody have anything to say? Does anybody agree, disagree?
I agree.
I agree with Patricia. I mean, I think the problem with giving too much credit to one person about something as big as like the ending of slavery is that it draws attention away from all the things that people before have done. Because we got to remember that the first slaves were brought to America through Jamestown in 1616, which was like what, like 100 or something years before, 150 years before America was founded.
Yeah.
So, it's easy to forget. Like when we give too much credit to Abraham Lincoln, it's easy to forget like what, like everyone in the previous years have tried to.
Okay. Okay. Does anybody here in this call think that it's one side or the other? Does anyone really believe in one argument over the other?
I mean, if there was really going to be one or the other, ironically, I think it would have to go to those who seceded because by leaving the union, they would lose their Senate and House seats, and so any amendment that would be put on the floor would have to go through a Republican Congress and legislator, and so that would easily just pass without having to be filibustered or brought down to compromise with any of the racist Democrats.
Interesting. Okay. Does anybody have any response to that? Does anybody agree with that or disagree? What do you guys think?
I think it makes a lot of logistical sense what David said, but I think when you're dealing with a complex issue, it's really hard to just pinpoint one person. And I think it would be easier, like from like a teaching perspective for you, Sean, to say like this person fixed everything, just to kind of sum it up and move on. But in the reality, pretty much any movement or any change that's been made, it's not one person, it's a group of people. Otherwise, change couldn't have been made to begin with.
And exactly. And that's what I want you guys to take away from today's lesson. I don't want you guys thinking that, oh, just because the textbook says it, just because it appears one way, doesn't really mean that's true, because every single person has an indifferent interpretation on every single event. Everything that happens in our everyday lives can be looked at a different way. For example, if something were to happen on campus at Manhattan College, the 16 of us in this call could have 16 different opinions on what happened. So one thing you guys need to remember is that when you're looking at historical events and looking at sources and so on, you have to look at it through a filtered perspective, because every single source that you're going to be looking at is going to be through the filter of somebody who interprets it a certain way, which is essential. Now, let me ask you guys one final question. For you guys who are sort of on the fence, thinking that it's a little bit of both, which I think is a good response, are you rock solid in this opinion, or do you think that if someone were to present a really convincing argument with a ton of evidence supporting one side, that you could lean towards that side, or are you thinking you're staying in the middle?
I think it just goes along with what Kevin said. Like, I think this is just too big of an accomplishment to put on one person or even one group. I really think like it was just even before like just that event. Like, I feel like just Abraham Lincoln just so happened to be the president at the time, and not to say like he was against slavery, but not to say that he was pro-slavery, but like I don't think he was so adamantly against slavery either. I think just like he was kind of in the place, and I think he did play an important role, being that like he did say, all right, let's end the slavery, and maybe he wasn't the first person to bring it about, but like again, I think just there's too many key important parts to really just pin it on one person to say, oh, you're the reason why slavery ended. Like even the group, like I don't think we could just solely put it on them, because without without the actual democracy or the presidential like to kind of like put it in place, like I feel like the actual like revolt against slavery would be a little less effective, because I feel like he set the stage for it to be like actual like all right, this is our country and we're not doing this. Like the president is just what are supposed to be our leader of the country, so if he says it, like it automatically puts in the head of the Americans like, okay, like this is something that should happen. That's just my opinion. Again, I'm not a history guy, so I feel yeah.
No, awesome. That was a great interpretation, and that was it really made a lot of sense, your argument, and you're able to bring in a lot of different forms of evidence to support it, which was, I thought, awesome. Okay, so since I've run out of time now, I'm going to have to cut off today's debate. I think that we got a lot of great interpretations on an event that needs to be interpreted, because it cannot be told through the perspective of one person, because then that would be unfair to the millions of other people who also experienced this event. So for homework, what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a link. I'm going to explain this real quick because my time is up. I'm going to send a link into the group, into the chat, and it's going to bring you to a Google form. And on this form, you're just going to write a paragraph, about 5 to 6 sentences, explaining whether or not you support one side of the debate or not. But since the class consensus seems like you can't really attribute it to one person or the other, I will allow you guys to make an argument explaining why you think that one side was actually, or not, that one side can't be solely attributable, and how it was a mixture of both. So the instructions are there. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to email me. If you guys don't get the link from this chat, I can send it again over email, but please reach out and let me know if you don't have it. Thank you guys, and I had a good time teaching this lesson.
Thank you, Sean.